So picture this. You sit down with your spouse at dinner and they finally pop the question to you. Hey, I think we should retire. And panic immediately runs through your body because you haven't even actually thought about what retirement is actually going to look like. In this episode of The Capitalist Investor, we dig into the conversations you should be having about your retirement. Tony, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Not much, man. Doing well.
Awesome. Well, hey, we got the retirement conversations that you should be having with your spouse, significant other, things like that, right? So, I kind of teased it in the hook a little bit if you heard that, but like, what should you be talking about when you actually make that decision to kind of really get serious about retirement?
I would assume that some of the surface conversations are like, I want to retire in a few years. What should we do? Like vacation. Hey, we build a deck. Look, I would imagine it's stuff like that. It's not like, hey, have you thought about Medicare? Have you thought about, when are we going to turn on Social Security? Somebody in the relationship could or should be thinking of that,
Yep.
but I don't know if it actually happens. I think it's more of like the top surface fun stuff.
Right.
And when you really get into it, there can be some major complications.
Yep, absolutely. So, as I'm going through my notes here, the word unspoken, sticks out to me, right? So, yeah, things are probably in the back of each one of your minds about, when you're going to retire, what it looks like. But, I would say maybe kind of the three most common misalignments that we see between, people in a relationship is the timeline, right? And I see this all the time, especially in people I'm talking with for the first time. It's like, when are we going to retire? If there's age differences, are we trying to time up the year, right?
Yeah.
Or is one person going to work longer than the other person if both people are working? So, timeline, I think, is a great place to start. Spending is obviously something we talk about all the time, especially when it relates to planning. It's a huge shift, right? Going from spending, or it's going from saving to spending.
Yeah.
I just had this conversation with clients today, right? They can spend more if they want to, and it's basically the same topic we talk about every time that they come into the office. So understanding your spending philosophy, hey, what are we going to spend? And then, kind of what does it look like? This may sound simple, it may sound dumb, but just talking with your significant other about what are we going to do with this next 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Are we just sitting home watching TV, hanging out, or are we, traveling the world, or somewhere in between?
I mean, I don't know if it fits the topic or not, but I mean, one of the more interesting conversations I have, and I really don't have any input as this rolls out in a client meeting, but there's some scenarios where, one spouse stayed home for several years because they retired early, or they were, more of domestic, engineer kind of
right.
person. And then the other one was working. And then now it's like, now you're both going to be domestic engineers. and the one spouse, like, you could see it in their face and their eyes, and some of the things they say, they're like, I was really happy doing this alone. I don't get my. You're gonna be home now, like doing what? You're gonna mess up my lifestyle.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen that often, but I've heard them a few times, and I'm just like, woof. What what a conversation, man! And I get to be part of that. Great.
Oh yeah, that happens it happens.
It does.
All
It
the
does.
time.
Yeah. Or there's one that might retire early and be like, man, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And the other one is working, and what am I going to do for that first, couple of years? They usually figure it out. But all right. So some of the things that we talked about this, like, hey, what are we talking about, right? And things that you should be thinking about is, depending on the year or the year that you retire, how old you are. If you're 65 or older, Medicare is pretty simple, right? You got one option, and it's the best of the best option. If it's not, and you're pre-65, man, you really need to think about what healthcare coverage looks like. How much is it going to cost? Who needs it? What's all of that? Social Security. When are we going to start that? And then, yeah, spending, right? Spending when you were working was maybe a little bit easier. But when you're not making money anymore and you got to create the paycheck from your portfolio, did you save enough?
Right. Yeah.
So those kind of give me, those are usually the top kind of 3 areas to really hone in on. Can you add or subtract anything from that, D?
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up pretty well. But yeah, it's I'd say a lot of the advice that we're giving is not always, just solely related to finances. That's probably a pretty good topic for next week, kind of, what happens if you retire before 65, right? There's a lot to think about there. But yeah, if there's a gap in between retirement, say 2 years, someone's retired 2 years before the other spouse, what is that person going to do at home? Are they, do they have a plan with how they're going to spend their time? So, there's a lot to think about, a lot to unpack, once you kind of get past the surface conversations.
Here's my biggest takeaway. It's never too early to start planning, because when you do plan and you do see one of our plans roll out and you kind of see how intricate it is, it's going to open up the lens of like, oh, I can do this and I can do that. So like getting the roadmap and the crystal ball so that you can look into the future may then jar your ideas of what you can spend and what you can do together and what you should do together. So it's like, hey, I'm 5 years away. I'll wait till I'm 2 years away to start planning. That's that's a bad lens to look through. Is it the worst thing you could? No, you don't. But I mean, the more I'm a planner, so the longer I can sit there and think about stuff, like I feel like it's just going to be more mapped out. That's how I'm designed by nature. And some people aren't like that. I'd be like, hey, I'm just going to let this thing roll. And I have I can't do that. Right. And there's nothing wrong with either lens, but I'm like, man, I'd rather have this thing built 5 years ahead of time. Right. Just so I can start thinking of things I didn't think about.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's going to be, just like marriage in general, there's going to be clashes, right? What happens if pretty much every relationship is like this. What if one person is more of a spender and one person is more of a saver? That's going to be amplified in retirement,
right?
How you invest your money. There's usually one more conservative person and one more aggressive person. So how do those things balance out?
Right.
And one thing I'll mention before we get into kind of how we build a shared vision. One thing I notice in preparing for this, if that is a problem for you, spending, right, and what to spend on, fund money accounts are a good solution for that. So you don't have to know exactly what you're going to spend on and why, but you can have separate accounts that you're saving into throughout the year, maybe from your retirement accounts that are going to go towards like your hobby, or vacation, things like that. So if there's each one of you has a little bit
or early gifting strategies.
Yeah, that's another good one. So how do we get to that kind of the shared vision for retirement, in a practical sense? So I'd say how maybe we can ask a few questions on exactly how what you can ask each other to come down to a shared vision of retirement. So a good question is what does our average Tuesday, what's that going to look like in retirement, right?
Right.
So, where
is it football season or not? Right. I mean, I would imagine travel is the most thing, right? Because you didn't really probably get to do most of that when you were working. Now you got an abundance of time, you would think. So where are you going to travel? Who are you going to travel with?
Yep. Excellent questions.
Right. And then, are you going to visit extended family that might not live in the area? Right. I mean, and are you just going to go with friends? You're going to go by yourselves. Right. So, I think those are all, I really see that a lot, like trying to find time in your schedule is going to be the hardest part to comprehend. But from probably 95% of the people that retire, they're like, man, I'm more busy now than I was when I was working.
Yep, hear it all the time.
So it's we can only say it so much, but that's what I hear. I hear it a lot. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that side, right? So, but outside of that, I think like the key takeaways is like start early, start talking about it now, even if you're 3, 5, or even 10 years away. Like, what does this look like, right? Where are you going to spend your time, and do your visions align? So I think those are the biggest takeaways.
Yep, absolutely. And you just never know. Maybe your partner has a completely different vision of retirement than you do. So, step one is talking about it, right? Yeah. I always liken, coming in to see us. It's similar to going into like the doctor, right?
Right.
You don't really want to go into the doctor, so they tell you what's wrong with you, or tell you to work out more or eat better, right? So the same thing kind of applies to financial advisors. But just talking about these issues and getting a shared plan is really the first step to your retirement.
Yeah, and I know we got a little bonus segment here, but I have heard and seen it, a couple times where it's like, hey, one of the spouses who's the financial person is like, I know what's going on, but my spouse doesn't. They have no idea about the things, and the only reason I'm working with you is that if something happens to me, they wouldn't know what to do or go to. So my job as the financial person of the relationship is to find somebody that aligns with my thought pattern, my vision, how I manage money, and just be aligned with that person, so that if something happens to me, my spouse is going to get a different version of me, right? on the financial lens part. And sometimes I see this as like, even if you're a DIY and you don't want to work, like, you should still interview financial advisors and pick one that you like, and then you can still do what you want, right? But it's like, hey, if something happens to me tomorrow, go talk to this person, because everything that they said aligns with what I did the vetting for you. Just go talk to them and say, hey, I'm not here anymore. Go talk to them.
Yep.
Right. And that could be another way to do it. Most people just say, hey, I'm kind of tired of doing it anyway. I do want to travel. I want to do this. And I want to stop spending less time on this stuff. But it's also there as a dual purpose for, finding the next the CEO of the household.
Yep, exactly. Well, well said there, Tony. I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yep.
If you guys have any questions, comments, ideas for a show, hit us up at info@swpconnect.com, and we'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.